I'm definitely not the guy to hop onto what's popular at the time or a trend of the day, but when I pick up a hardcore punk album from 1982 and the themes on it are as relevant today as they were back then, I'm guessing that protest music is gonna be the theme of today. And if you're looking for some radical punk music to put on those protest playlists and get out wild in the streets, this album is what you've been missing. This is Circle Jerk's Wild in the Streets, released in 1982, re-released in 1988, and I think re-released in the 90s as well. Yeah, also in 1997. This is an in-your-face fit of rage against modern society, bookended with a couple of cover songs that are unique, tone-shifting, soften the harsh edges of this hardcore punk rock. This thing is only about 26 minutes, contains 15 tracks that obviously only take about 1 to 2 minutes each. It's fast, in your face, punchy, and with themes that, like I said, are unfortunately as relevant today as they were back in the 80s. Being from the 80s and being super influential, it employs a lot of styles and tropes that have been worn thin by this point, but I'm gonna obviously give it a pass as it's what inspired a ton of other bands. Thankfully, I don't have to compare it to all those because you look them up and see who they inspired instead of me telling you that. Hell, I won't make you do all the work. I've got an example right here. They inspired The Offspring. That's one. Look the rest up. I'm not gonna do all the work today. You do some work. Get wild in the streets. Get wild on your keyboard. Months and months ago, when I did end up picking this album up for the first time, I was a pretty casual punk listener, but I got lucky and somebody had tossed away pretty much their whole entire punk collection, so I scooped up a whole bunch of interesting albums, and most of them turned out to be old school punk rock. So if you're not new to the channel, you've seen me going through a bunch of cool old punk, and this is such a cool tone-setting album for sort of the whole period of that. And if you are still that casual punk listener, I feel like this album does a wonderful job setting the stage and getting you started on that road. And I'm sick of hearing me talk about just the generalities of this, so let's get started and get into the title track. As much as I do enjoy the original version of the song, the Circle Jerks rendition of Wild on the Streets gives it a slightly different meaning. Where the original is a kind of blues-inspired rock track that takes you to a run-down neighborhood on having a block party, this cover version feels more like gang warfare. Along with the band's punk rock chorus delivery, they also rewrote some of the middle verses to include lines about beer and Valium and not fooling around with the boys in the Wolves gang because they're real mean mothers. It's honestly super well done, and it's one of the more early versions of hip-hop I've ever stumbled upon. Keeping the tempo fairly high on the next track, Leave Me Alone, but the vocal performance from former Black Flag member Keith Morris pulls the track closer to hardcore than rock. It's quick and to the point like a hardcore classic punk song is expected to be, but it's got these awesome builds and cool crescendos that really could have had something built off of it. One of my favorites is the next track, Stars and Stripes, and it might be because I'm a fairly well-traveled Canadian who gets misrepresented as an American. People don't tend to like Americans when you're traveling, and so this one's anti-American sentiments kind of resonate pretty well with me. It's also got just funny 80s references, and as much as I don't really resonate with the 80s, I think they were one of the most hilarious decades of all time. It's pretty much everything I could ask for thematically from an American 80s punk song, with a line like, "No more housewives, days of our lives, television, Disneyland, basketball, stars and stripes!" Or lines like, "You're all gonna die and you voted for that guy!" Just a great, fun track. Definitely one of my favorites. Moving on to a song that I hope Elon wouldn't name his child after. This song's called 86th. This is a reference to when F-86 pilots would shoot down an enemy plane and they would call it, "I 86'd that plane." This one's slightly more manic than the last track. It's a pretty quick track. Instrumentally, I'm not a huge fan, but it tells a whole heck of a lot of a story for how quick it is. It's a guy who has a lot. A bunch of people come in. They basically take everything he's got. They love what he's got, and they tear it all down and build up something new that he hates. Sentiments are great. Song's not so great. You know, you win some, you lose some. It's a punk rock album. It's gone about as fast as it came in, though. And it moves on to a track that somehow in the 80s basically perfectly represents call-out culture. It's someone getting caught doing something and then having to meet the press is the name of the track. It's another high-intensity track that tells the song about a phony politician getting tricked into a bad deal. In this case, you actually have to trick someone and catch them in the act of doing something instead of just picking something that they exposed themselves for in the past that is no longer socially acceptable. After that bit of intense struggle that this song has, the band gets to rejoice as the politician that's corrupt crumbles as they face the nation. It moves on to the even more manic, slightly kinda disjointed track, Trapped, with the cool, intense, really memorable chorus of Trapped! I'm trapped! This one's the slowest, most dramatic cut on the album, showing off how cohesive the band can be with the punctuated, intense choruses broken up with their kind of rocky, slower verse delivery that does a great job encompassing that feeling of being environmentally enclosed or even mentally enclosed somewhere. Good track, very memorable, good delivery, and quick. If you don't like it, move on. Essentially a middle finger to the rich. Murder the Disturbed rocks you through a rich, sloppy, cruel household and instructs the listener to cull all the people who have blindly benefited from this destructive, disgusting system. With a line that's hilariously reminiscent of Trump's Drain the Swamp slogan of kill the Democrats, reinstate the Democrats. It's a song that's just totally frustrated by the corruption and greed of the system and just the ultimate just lack of functionality of it all. I'm frustrated by it, they're frustrated by it, and nothing seems to have changed since the 80s, so let's make some change, I guess. Get wild in the streets, guys. Murder the Disturbed. I must make a note. Don't murder anybody. Please don't break anything. It's just a song. We're ultimately just frustrated with our government and our policing system, and something needs to change, and the funding needs to go in better places. We're paying taxes, and they need to go into places that benefit us and don't fight back against us. And I really have to hammer home the non-violent approach, because the next song is literally titled Letter Bomb, and it's a quick little track about sending a letter bomb to your boss, killing him, and hopefully destroying your entire office in the process. I don't mind the song either. It's a fun little quick track, but the sentiment behind it is just unfortunately too violent. But we've now made it to my absolute favorite track on the album, Question Authority. It's fast, it's upbeat, it's hardcore punk rock to the core. It's got themes of living by your own laws and following your own moral compass, and it could not resonate with me more deeply. It doesn't just kick you in the face with the high energy punk from the beginning. It starts you off with a slow building marching drum beat that gets you marching in the street with all your soldiers like you're dutifully ready for battle, like you really have something to go for and you really have a meaning behind your march. And then it comes out and question authority, and you cannot help but get up, rock and roll, feel like you need to be out in the front and absolutely be there and shout your truth. And unfortunately, today that truth is what the people in charge are doing is not right and is not okay. And they need to be told that, and absolutely that needs to be heard. We won't just be blind, dutiful soldiers marching in the streets. We're gonna be hooligans getting wild in the streets at the same time. Wildness doesn't have to equal destruction, though, please. Wildness does feel like freedom, though. The next track seems to be a more personal experience of the band. This one's called Defamation Innuendo. And it's not really much of a song. It's more of a story of a journalist who is supposed to go and review their show, but doesn't want to pay for a ticket, shows up, isn't allowed in, doesn't listen to the band, and just says, they're not good, because he can't see them and doesn't want to do any hard work. So the band is pretty upset, and so defamation, innuendo is basically the song. Yeah, that's that one. There's a couple more fast-hitting hardcore punk songs on this one that lyrically are super great, hard-hitting, but ultimately, instrumentally, I'm pretty worn out at this point. Maybe I'm really not much of a punk rocker, I guess. Moral Majority is a quick smashing of cookie-cutter capitalist America, basically summed up in the one line, "I'll kill to be free!" And Political Stew takes aim at basically all reactionary politics, more generally taking aim at hate groups, saying they can all burn in hell. And that leads us into the final, kind of more soothing end. The closing track is a combination of two songs to bring all the people back together at the end. It's a combination of the two songs, Just Like Me by Paul Revere and the Gang, and Put a Little Love in Your Heart by Jackie DeShannon. It's a beautiful, memorable, catchy, just fun combination that comes pretty out of left field after what you've been kind of ear blasted with this hardcore punk. It's a welcome break from the crashing punk. They don't take it too seriously with some hilarious voice inflections, and obviously they put a little love in your heart, a little bit of extra punk rock flair at the end. They can't help but have a little fun. Well, I am amazed by the longevity and the staying power of the themes on this album, and the inspirations that these guys created. I'm not blown away by this album entirely. It is pretty one-dimensional after a while, besides the fun covers at the start and finish. There's a couple standout tracks like Question Authority and Trapped. Reading about this album, I ended up hearing about their debut quite a bit. I'm not sure where they went from here. I know they broke up, came back together, broke up again, and we're gonna actually tour this year. Obviously, there was some fun quarantine pandemic stuff, but maybe they're gonna get wild in the streets anyways? I don't know. It was a 40th anniversary to represent their first album, I believe. I'm certainly curious to see where they progress their sound from here. If I can ever stumble upon another Circle Jerk CD, I'll be picking it up. That's 100%. There's no way when I picked this up I could have anticipated it being a perfect protest album. But here it is, guys. Get wild in the streets, but don't forget to be safe out there. It's time for some change. Good luck. Let's get a little testy in here. A little testy. Wake up. Wild in the streets, running, 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 wild in the streets, running. Running wild in the streets, running wild in the pub. She's a running. Yeah.